We're going to begin with the impacts of that big consenting blunder by Auckland Council. As we reported late last month, the council over a year issued more than 400 resource consents it potentially shouldn't have. Building has started at up to 137 of those homes and could start at the other 293 at any time. Our reporting until now has focused on the impact to the consent holders. They've been told to reapply, and when they do, their consents might change or even be rejected. But there's also the neighbours of these people. Their homes could be losing value because next door they've been allowed to build higher and wider and bigger than they should have been. The situation is entirely the fault of Auckland Council, and yet the council is telling homeowners it's up to them to legally challenge the potentially unlawful consents. No fault of their own, but they're left with the challenge. In a moment we'll hear from the lawyer who brought this bungle to the attention of Auckland Council, but first here's Zach Fleming and our cameraman Nick Monroe with a case study.
Soon, when Gary Pont makes his morning coffee, he'll probably be staring into someone else's bedroom.
It's a shock to the system, more or less, I would say.
A property developer's building a two-storey backyard extension to the house next door. Gary, who's 82 and has lived on Beaconsfield Street in Greyland for his entire life, says he would have liked at the very least a courteous heads up. But he only found out
when they started digging out the backyard and that, and it was the way that he went about it. He's never approached us or anything. He's just put the show up and that's it, you know.
He is Alistair Raw of Raw Landscape and Build Limited. And there's a possibility that the only reason he's been allowed to build this is because Auckland Council stuffed up and issued him with resource consent when it shouldn't have. The council botched up to 430 resource consents in 2017 because of an incorrect interpretation of the law. Gary is one of the human faces of that stuff-up.
I don't think we'll see daylight somehow with the way that they've gone up.
And Auckland Council has essentially washed its hands of its mistake. It's acknowledged up to 430 resource consents might have been wrongly issued, but told homeowners like Gary that it's up to them to sort it out. Gary's only option is to seek a High Court review.
Oh, if I'd have had the finance, I think I would have been along to Metro Law to see what had happened there.
But Gary, who's currently battling melanoma, doesn't have the finance, and without the money for a High Court battle, he is powerless. There is literally nothing he can do to sort out whether his neighbour's two-storey extension should be allowed. Auckland Council has recommended that Alistair Raw and the other 429 people potentially issued with incorrect consents apply for new ones. And it has recommended that they stop building until those new consents come through. But Alistair Raw hasn't acted on either of those recommendations. He is continuing to build and hasn't applied for a new consent. Mr. Raw declined to be interviewed, but he told me that I would be hearing from his lawyer. I am yet to hear from his lawyer. Gary's parents moved in here in 1947 from up the road. So for Gary, that's 71 years in this house and 82 years on this street.
Yeah, seen a lot of changes in that time.
He remembers his neighbours from back in 47.
There was Mr. and Mrs. Tilton in there from Tilton and Opie's The Undertakers, and Mr. and Mrs. Cronin. Mr. Cronin was on the Auckland City Council, and the chemists along in Great North Road. And
basically, Gary's from an era when you didn't have to lock your door and it was weird if you didn't know your neighbours. But he's not anti-change. He doesn't think things have gotten worse. He just recognises that they're different. When I asked Gary what he thought of his neighbourhood's transformation, gentrification, he simply said it was inevitable. Suggest he's a NIMBY, and Gary winces.
I'd be approachable with the way, you know, if he'd have gone the right way about it, but no, I don't think I'd hate to be labelled as a NIMBY, you know.
And it's hard to label him one. He's not objecting to intensification, which is the typical gripe of NIMBYs in Auckland. He's objecting to an already existing house being built up and towering over his. And his objection is unique because the renovation potentially shouldn't even have resource consent. I asked Gary if he'd accept an apology from Alistair Raw.
With his attitude, I don't think that would happen. That's his style of doing things.
Now Gary's considering leaving Beaconsfield Street after 82 years.
I've only got a few years to go here now, and I thought I could have lived it out with quiet lifestyle, but we'll wait and see on that.
Wait and see how much sunlight his kitchen gets. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Now, as Zach said, Alistair Raw, Gary's neighbour, has declined to be interviewed. Auckland Council wasn't available for an interview today, but at the end of last month, when this was first reported, it said it will help people affected as best it can. We'd love some material qualification of what that actually means. This could include helping people apply for new consents, the waiving of fees and facilitation of mediation between consent holders and their neighbours. But what say the building is already up in breach? What happens then?